is time for real change.
I want to start by paying tribute to the survivors of the fire and their family members who've campaigned with such dignity and such determination for the past 2 years. And we should have that understanding and that sympathy of our responsibility to ensure everyone is able to live in safety wherever they are in this country. But this was an avoidable tragedy. All the survivors, all of them, deserve a new home and safety and security in this country.
I visited the site just after the fire. I saw the firefighters there, physically and emotionally exhausted after battling those deadly flames for hours on end. And conference, I can tell you that nobody who had seen that in person, nobody who had actually been there to witness the sheer dedication and determination of those firefighters there on that dreadful day could ever question their professional duty or their commitment. Those men and women who went into that building to save lives are heroes, as are all firefighters who regularly go above and beyond in order to save lives.
The Prime Minister pledged that the NHS was safe in his hands.
It is completely untrue. There are no circumstances whatever in which this government or any Conservative government will put the NHS on the table in any trade negotiation.
When you're dealing in trade, everything's on the table. So NHS or anything else.
The really big concern is that President Trump has said he wants to see foreign countries pay more for drugs developed in the US, and the NHS is a really big target for that, because not only does it set pricing throughout the UK, it's used as a reference price for countries around the world.
His government released this. We have since obtained this. These uncensored documents leave Boris Johnson's denials in absolute tatters. The US and the UK have already finished initial discussion on lengthening patents for medicines. Longer patents can mean only one thing: more expensive drugs.
I hate to break it to the Prime Minister, but under his government and that of his predecessor, privatisation has more than doubled to £10 billion in our NHS. There are currently 20 NHS contracts out to tender, and when he's promised 40 hospitals, he then reduced that to 20, and then it turns out that reconfiguration is taking place in just 6 hospitals. And so these numbers keep tumbling down.
We know that trust in Boris Johnson is very low. We know when he did a debate recently and it came up as a question, everybody laughed at the idea he could be trustworthy.
I'd just like to ask you, how important is it for someone in your position of power to always tell the truth?
I think it's absolutely vital.
When he leads a manifesto that the flagship policy in it is there going to be 50,000 more nurses.
In this manifesto, we pledge 50,000 more nurses.
And now you, as the Culture Secretary, a member of that cabinet, a member of the government, admit that 19,000 of them already are NHS nurses. Viewers at home go, well, this is complete nonsense.
You cannot protect the public on the cheap.
We think we can get 20,000 more police officers.
Well, we're putting 20,000 more police on our streets, and I think that is incredibly welcome to people.
That doesn't even cover the cuts, Mr. Hancock.
Well, this is about what we're going to do in the future, and in the future we're going to have more police on our streets and tackle crime.
No, sorry, we won't even have as many police officers as you cut.
The police and security services must get the resources they need, not 20,000 police cuts. Theresa May was warned by the Police Federation, but she accused them of crying wolf. As Labour has set out in our manifesto, we will recruit another 10,000 new police officers, including more armed police, who need to be properly rewarded, as well as 1,000 more security service staff to support our communities and help keep us safe.
It's the rebirth, in many senses, of a serious thinking left that's looking forward beyond the 80s, that's looking forward to the serious economic issues the next Labour government's going to have to face.
Does she not agree that people sleeping on the streets of our capital city, being charged exorbitant rents, and children being brought up in bed and breakfast hotels is a disgrace?
I'm horrified that there should be any idea of cutting disability and sick benefits. They're not sufficient as it is. Many people live in great poverty because of the inadequate levels of benefits.
Whilst obviously condemning the bombing campaigns in Britain, it is important to be able to talk to Sinn Féin as a way of demonstrating to Sinn Féin and its supporters that there is some point in dialogue.
And we say there isn't money sufficient for our own public services. Thousands more deaths in Iraq will not make things right. It will set off a spiral of conflict, of hate, of misery, of desperation that will fuel the wars, the conflict, the terrorism, the depression and the misery of future generations.
Ordinary people all over this country can show their disgust at the military policies being pursued by George Bush and very unfortunately supported actively by the British government.
There was something important in one of the Sunday papers today about an alleged abuse of power and misuse of public funds by Boris Johnson. I was on the BBC's flagship news programme this morning and I was asked about a range of issues. It's how our democracy works. But I was followed by Boris Johnson's deputy, who was asked nothing about these allegations. This is how the establishment works. They close ranks. They put privilege first. Things have to change.
And a number of parliamentary colleagues of mine, the late great Tony Banks and Stuart Holland, former member, were arrested outside South Africa House, and it was one of those strange moments when you're arrested by the police and you say, under what charge am I arrested? Assuming one is going to be told you're doing obstruction or something rather. They said no, it was under the Diplomatic Immunities Act. It was behaviour that was offensive to a foreign diplomatic mission. And the police officer said to me, what do you plead? And why have you come here? I said, I've come here to be as offensive as possible to the South African apartheid regime, but I offer no plea, so that you will have to offer a plea on my part of not guilty. The cases all went to court, and we were all exonerated on the grounds of our moral outrage of apartheid, all given compensation, and all that compensation was given to the ANC and the anti-apartheid movement.
Late at night here, it's quite disgusting. After the dinners are over and the division bell rings for 10 o'clock, there's fleets of limousines draw up and out get large Tory MPs with even larger stomachs wearing dinner jackets, and they stride in to vote. The job of an MP is to represent their people.
If you believe something, you should say it. If you don't believe it, you shouldn't say it. I think there are principles involved here. If I stand for election as a Labour candidate, as a socialist, people know what they're voting for.
Labour will put people first before privilege.
Labour's manifesto is a manifesto for hope.
We will end university tuition fees.
A Labour government would nationalise rail, mail, water and energy companies.
So a Labour government will ensure the big oil and gas corporations that profit from heating up our planet will shoulder the burden and pay their fair share through a just transition tax. Labour will scrap universal credit. We will unleash a record investment blitz, and it will rebuild our schools, our hospitals, care homes, and the housing so desperately need. It's time for real change.